Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Scenes. Every Thursday we have either transformation time or behind the scenes. With behind the scenes, we get to have our guest speaker tell us everything about their project. They get into the numbers. They tell us what kind of project it is, and the best part is getting to hear the kind of problems they encounter. With these kind of projects, they're going to tell us how they solve the problems. If it's a new problem, what they learned and how their plan is to mitigate it or completely remove that from happening in the future. So just hearing from their learning experiences. So you have me, I'm the host of the show, Diana Lizarazo, and today our guest speaker is Randall Hoeber. So hope you guys are excited and ready to have Randall come on. Let's see if he's here. Okay. Hey Randall.
Hey Diana, nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's been a great busy summer. It's gone by like
Yeah,
nothing.
I hear you. Lots of movements.
Yeah.
So let's get started with just letting the viewers know a little bit about you first. So just tell them, where you're located, what your real estate strategy is, anything you'd like to share, your experience.
Sure, definitely. Well, my name is Randall Hoeber. I'm in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, for those of you who don't know. And I've been investing in real estate since 2016, so we're going on to the sixth year here now. I've scaled up into multifamily buildings with some partners, and I'm fortunate that I'm actually sitting in one of these buildings right now, Diana. This is our
Oh,
eightplex.
awesome.
Yeah, so I figured since we're going behind the scenes, we might as well be on the ground. I'm the boots on the
Sounds
ground
good.
guy in Saskatchewan for some of my partners.
Awesome. Is this the deal we're going to talk about, or it's another one, I feel like? This is the one? Oh, awesome.
This is the
So we'll
one.
get a little preview also. So if you can just show us whatever you'd like to show and just tell us a little bit about what was the purpose with this deal, just so people can get an understanding of like what happened on this project before we get into the problems.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the purpose of buying the building was purely to be able to, make some cash flow and generate returns for the investors, and then do a refinance and get the money back in their hands. And if everything goes well, maybe there's an invitation to do it again. So that's kind of the big picture on what our intention was.
And what's the time frame for that?
We're looking at a 2 to 3 year time frame for a full turnaround from acquisition to refinance and optimizing in between, which is kind of where I come in.
Awesome. And sorry, did you say, I'm not sure if you said, but how many units is it?
This is an 8 unit building, and
Okay.
we bought this building for 450,000.
Awesome. And so do you want to just take us through the building and just tell us, what has changed so far, what changes are need to be made or whatever you'd like to share?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The thing that really caught our eye when we were looking at the deal was the ability to increase the NOI in a short period of time. It was renting below market value, and the opportunity was there with the increase in the demand for rentals in Yorkton to increase the rent at maybe a faster pace than some people might have envisioned. We didn't necessarily want to wait for tenant turnover, although that's always a great opportunity to give it a big boost. But the first opportunity we had to give notices for rent increases, we did, and the tenants accepted those rent increases. So we were able to increase the NOI fairly quickly within the first 6 months, and then that's with those current tenants. And then there's been tenant turnover, so we increased quite a bit from $790 per door to $900 per door per unit.
That's
Like so, $790 rent, 2 bedrooms, up to $900 rent for the 2 bedrooms.
that's awesome. And so would you like to go through the numbers of how it went? So let's start
Sure.
with
Yeah.
like you said already the purchase price was again?
Yeah, well, originally it was listed at $600,000, and it was overpriced. And slowly over time, the seller realized if they want to move this, they had to be realistic with their numbers. And we had a really good negotiator on our team who really drilled down into the diligence and the numbers and said, this is what it's worth. This is what we'll pay you. So we got it for 450 grand and it was appraised like 465. So that means we bought it with $15,000 of equity. It was,
Wow. And how that did it take a lot of time to get, because that's a very big difference if they're thinking it's 600 and bringing it all the way down to 450, you said?
That's right. Yeah. It's well,
so how long did that process take?
Well, I would say it sat on the market untouched for about a month or two before they realized that was too high of a price. So then it came down, a bit more, then they got some offers, and then eventually people went through the due diligence stage and we got it under contract at that 450. Again, you take what you have and you bring it back to the seller and you say, this is not the right price, this is not going to work. This is the price that this is the one that will work. And they were motivated enough to move it at that price. So we were able to get it with 15,000 equity. At the point of, I just wrote down some numbers here because I knew I wasn't going to have my laptop in front of me. So I went through our analysis sheet and jotted down some numbers. And when we acquired this property, Diana, at that $450,000, that was an 8.8% cap rate and a 9.3% cash on cash return going into the deal. That's not even what it's going to look like once the deal gets completed, once we refinance it. So already the numbers were good.
And is that good for that area? Is that expected or even better than expected for your area?
No, that's about the norm. You can probably get, depending upon the quality of the property, the tenant profile, and the whether the rents are at or below market value, 8% cap rate, give or take, location, age, all those things come into play. And then, but the cash on cash is the other really, salient factor in all this, is that upon acquisition, it was already at 8%. Some people don't even get 8% when they put their money into the stock market. And now here we're getting it at 8%, purely with the intention that's going to get increased over time.
That's amazing. We do not see those numbers over here, that's for sure. Well, at least in the GTA, I don't know, maybe up north, maybe that happens, but definitely not where I live. Any other numbers that you'd like to share?
Let's just see here what my little cheat sheet here. So
your renovation costs.
Yeah. When we were raising the capital for the deal, we included a renovation cost and a reserve fund right up front, so that when we had the opportunity to do the renovations, we already had the capital. So since we acquired this property in January of 2022, here we are in September, right? So we're in 9 months. We've already done renovations to 3 of these buildings, 3 of the suites. And when I say renovation, I'm talking like new flooring, new lighting. We've done some electrical upgrades. We put in new cabinets, or not cabinets, cabinet pulls and stuff like that. Some cheap ways of increasing the appeal of it without having to go too overboard. And so we used the renovation capital that we had raised up front to take care of those renovations when the vacancies came available.
Interesting. So for the renovation budget, what's your expected term to get? And I know, obviously within tenant turnover it takes time, but did you have kind of like a time frame that you expected to be able to, get through all the ones you expected to renovate, all the changes you needed to make?
I've got a really good team of basically I've used 2 different people to do renovations, whether it was just coming in and doing a quick refresh with some paint. They're in and out in like 2 days. And the suite we're in right now, that's got the new flooring in and the new lighting, they did new tub surround, painted the bathroom. 3 days they were done. They were in and out. So once these guys are freed up to go, they're like, I give them the keys and boom, they're in, they get the work done, and it's ready for tenant.
That's awesome. But I meant like the full renovation, like of the building, like what you guys expect to get done. Did you have I'm assuming you probably had a 1 year, 2 year range of hopefully getting through all the renovation?
Right. Yeah.
And then, so what was your budget?
The goal is to have, the renovation budget was $50K. And so I think that breaks down to somewhere around like $4,500 per suite. So these are very modest, you know, what some people might call lipstick renovations. But I mean, this isn't cheap flooring that we put in here. It's good, durable flooring. I'm in a basement suite, so I put in the exact same flooring next to me. The other suite was also renovated, and we use exact same material. So we're using the same material for the floor, the same material for the lights, and we just want that to be uniform across the board. But I'm not going to displace anybody for renovation unless it's kind of the last one out of the 8. Then we'll give them follow the procedures, you know, legally to have them evicted so that we can do that renovation. Ultimately, we want to get everybody's rents from where they were to a higher point, to $950 for the 8s. So we're at $900 for 7. Let's see, the 7 8s, and 6 out of those 7 8s are being rented. Five out of those 7 are being rented at $900. 2 of them are being rented at $840 because those are the only 2 tenants left in the building. Everybody else has either left or we've turned upon the moment when they gave their notice to move. I had a renovation guys lined up. So to answer your question, the goal is that prior to the refinance, that we're at that $950 or greater for the 2 bedrooms.
Oh, awesome. And so have you gone through the refinance yet? Or is it,
no,
how much more time until you get into the refinance are you thinking?
That's like another 2 years down the road.
Okay,
and no doubt we'll be at $950 because the demand is just going to dictate that that's what it's going to be. There is no rent controls in Saskatchewan. There aren't any ceilings as to how high you can go. It's what does the market demand and what can the market bear. And
that's awesome.
That's what will dictate when we get to how we can get and how quickly we can get to our goal.
That's amazing. So since the from the beginning till now, how many turnovers or rent increases have you been able to get done so far?
Two of the tenants in the building received rent notice increases, and those rent notice increases took effect August 1st. So their rents went up by $50 each. So we increased $100 NOI upfront just with those 2 rent increases. But I had, we basically inherited with a couple of vacancies, so we immediately filled those up to $900 instead of $790. So big jump. Then another person moved out. We did the renovation, moved somebody in at $900. Now these guys moved out at the end of July, and we have this one ready to go for $900.
Oh, awesome. So that's like a little more than half your tenants. You've at least gotten or half the tenants at least have had some kind of increase, if not like that, the renovations and then the full increase that you expected.
Yeah, that's right. Out of the 8 suites, 6 of them have had some form of a renovation, whether it was fresh coat of paint, a brightening of the cabinets, some more modern appeal. The only 2 that we haven't done any renovations are the 2 that still have tenants on it, that have been occupied with the same tenants since we acquired this building.
Which are the ones that you already increased anyways? They're the ones that you increased the $50, right?
Yeah.
Also, I feel like technically all of them have been then increased.
Yes, that's right.
In some form or another, they've been all increased, just some higher than others.
That's right. Yeah.
That's amazing. That sounds like you're having probably amazing cash flow. Do you want to tell us what your expenses are like compared to what you're what income you're getting from them?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting because this is part of the behind the scenes, like what's going on. Well, one of the biggest things we discovered within about 2 or 3 weeks of taking possession of this property was that there was an issue with bed bugs. And there had been an issue with bed bugs for quite a few years in the building, but was never disclosed to us by the seller. So to make a long story short, after going through some legal proceedings and getting the seller to provide some funds to offset the cost of the bed bug remediation, we put in about $10,000 worth of bed bug remediation over the last 6 months. And that included steam treatments, chemical treatments, residual chemical spray around the perimeters for 60 days, or that have a 60-day residual effect. So anything that comes into contact with it within those 60 days, basically in contact with the poison and they die. And then we also went into this thermal treatment, which basically cooks the suite at 150 degrees, penetrates through the wood, penetrates through the ceiling, penetrates through the floor, and suite to suite, catches anything that's hiding in between. And so this has been a real arduous process for us, and it's been a very costly, expenditure over time. And while we may never fully eradicate bed bugs because they can come in on someone's shoe, we're winning the war because there's been no known cases in 3 months.
Oh, wow. And
Yeah.
this is the first time that you've dealt with the bed bugs, right? Your first experience with dealing with this.
Pests are a very interesting thing. And yes, it's the first time I've experienced, especially at that high level where it's just been an ongoing thing. I've dealt with mice, I've dealt with spiders, but I've never dealt with bed bugs. And I've been told that once they're in, you can't get rid of them. But we're winning the war because now we do every 2 months, the pest control guys will come back in and they'll do an inspection. And so that first inspection occurred on August 1st. And they leave a little, it looks like a little matchbox. It's like a glue, so it's called a glue board. And they just stick it in a location and say, do not touch that. They come back 2 months later, and that's the first thing they're going to look for. Is there anything on those glue boards? Any bugs? Any indicators of bugs? Because it may not be a bug, but it could be blood. But anything they find on there will tell if they've returned. And if they haven't returned, then ultimately we're winning the war, right? And so we're going to keep doing this ongoing every 2 months as part of the maintenance of this property. And it could go into perpetuity, or we might bring it to an end once we're confident that we've got a handle on it.
Interesting. So the 10 grand that you're talking about, was that the initial, or does that include them coming back also every 2 months to just do the checks and stuff?
It's cumulative because we started with one person who was doing it a certain method, and that method turned out not to be as effective as this other method, which was the thermal treatment. So then I brought in the thermal guys, and I could immediately see a difference because the first method of treatment would only take care of anything that it comes in contact with, so it doesn't get anything that's hiding. Whereas the thermal treatment gets not only things that comes in contact with, but anything that's hiding. And they can only survive at a certain temperature. And once they come into contact with the higher temperature, and they try to get away from it, but they can't escape because they're just moving from one area of heat to another area of heat, and they basically just die from that thermal treatment. So it's been far more effective, but it also costs more. So cumulatively, $10,000 between the two different pest control people that we've used.
Oh, okay.
And now the ongoing thing will just be an ongoing expenditure, monthly expenditure.
Okay. And so for this being your first time, and to help the viewers understand more about this, what are the learning experiences that you got out of dealing with bed bugs? Like, will you deal with, if another building comes up, are you willing to deal with it again?
Yes, I would, because I understand better now. And the far more effective way of doing it is through the thermal treatment. It's more expensive, it's more costly up front, but it's less onerous on everybody involved. Because the first go around, it was like, get rid of all the bedding, take all the clothing, take it to a laundromat, wash it all. It's got to be in the dryer for 40 minutes at this temperature. So it's a longer process. Whereas with the thermal, you don't have to move anything out. You don't have to get rid of the clothes. You don't have to get rid of bedding, because it'll just cook everything. And it'll just, if they're hanging on a piece of clothing, they're falling off that clothing and they're dying once they hit the ground because of the heat. So while it's more costly, it's more effective. So I wouldn't walk away from one because I understand better how we can proceed with it. What I would want to know is what's the history and what's been done in the past by the previous seller, and have they used that thermal treatment before? So those are the questions I would ask now that I never thought of asking then. And the seller never disclosed it, so we didn't discover it until after the fact.
So any tips then for example, like that, if people don't disclose it, is there a way for you to notice if there are bed bugs? Or, is there something that you would do differently even in the viewings when you're going to a viewing to see a property that you may try to see if there are bed bugs?
I know some things to look for, some warning signs, but I also learned now that a good question that I would ask, not just the agent or the seller, but if I come into contact with any tenants, Just out of curiosity, I'm an inspector. Just out of curiosity, have you had any issues with pests? I wouldn't say bed bugs specifically. I would use the word pests because you could have spiders, you could have cockroaches, you could have bed bugs, you could have mice, you could have rats. You could have another pest that I haven't even mentioned. So those would be some things that when I'm doing if I was doing a walkthrough and I ran into contact with a tenant, I just say, hey, I'm an inspector. Have you had any issues with pests in the building?
Mm-hmm. So then I guess visibly it's very hard to see something like that, and even if you're going through a walkthrough, then it sounds like?
Yes, because they tend to nest in non-visible areas. In a bed, in a mattress, it could be in a box, it could be some clothing that's stuffed in a corner or something like that. So really, if you don't know what you're looking for, like I wouldn't know what I was looking for until I was told this is what you got to look for. This is exactly what I'm looking for when I'm inspecting underneath the mattress. Things I wouldn't have even considered. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very great tips. And I think, and I mean, like you said, like just even asking the tenants the questions as you go in, because they're usually going to tell you the truth anyways, because if they're really bothered by something, they're going to be like, oh my God, this and this is a problem with my unit, and hopefully you're going to fix it for me or something, So
Yeah.
the tenants would probably be very, very vocal about, even just any problems, I feel like. So I feel like in general, probably just if you can get, talk to a tenant is probably,
Yeah.
I would say, even a good thing, just to be like, hey, how's the unit or something, just to kind of get an idea of the building itself, it sounds like.
Yeah. For some reason, I've come into contact with tenants, in other buildings or whatever during conversations, and they'll say, well, this previous place we had bed bugs. And I'd say, why didn't you ever report that? Because there's health inspectors, they can report it to. There's the Office of the Residential Tenancies, which is the provincial body that they could report this to. And quite often they don't because they're afraid that they're going to get kicked out by the landlord. So they keep their mouths shut and they put up with it. But if you say, hey, I am an inspector, because I'm not lying if I say I'm an inspector because I'm inspecting the property as I'm doing a walkthrough. And so I say I'm an inspector, well, then they might feel that's the invitation to say what's going on in that suite. They may not, they may or they may not say, but it's an opportunity to gather some additional information that the seller isn't telling you, that the seller's agent isn't telling you if it's on market. So that's something that I've learned is it's drill into some of these questions a bit more.
Mm-hmm. And that's very true. Actually, a lot of time, especially with the big buildings, they don't like their tenants knowing what's going on. It's very true. So usually you do have to say that you're somebody else, that you're not really going there to buy a house like that for an inspection, just to, make sure everything is okay or something. And so any other things that you've had to encounter, any other problems that you'd actually, sorry, before we went, sorry, I just remembered I did have another question.
Yeah.
Specifically, you said you had to go and get some money from the seller for not disclosing it. I'm just curious on how was even that process, because is that a new process for you too, that you've had to go through that and go to? That'd be very interesting to hear how, how it went for you.
It was basically a phone call to the lawyer and say, hey, this was not disclosed to us. Do we have any legal recourse? And he said that it is a latent defect. That's the terminology used. It's a latent defect. You were not advised of this when you were going through the process, even though there was disclosures. So his lawyer, he just went to the seller's lawyer and back and forth, and finally a settlement was put into place.
Oh, so it's very, on your end is pretty easy. So that's not like title insurance then. It's not going through title insurance. Like the specific seller actually provided some compensation for that?
Yeah, I just had to provide my evidence. I had to provide receipts and evidence of the work being done and what it cost us, and then give that to my lawyer, and my lawyer took it over, and we got compensated for that.
That's very good. That's very good to know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very good to know because sometimes like that, like some people think like, oh, I inherited this problem and stuck with it and nothing I can do, and I'll just have to, take care of the costs myself.
Yeah.
So
That's why
that's
you have
great.
that. They never hurts to ask the question, right? The lawyer might tell you no, you don't have any recourse in this particular instance. But if you
Sorry,
don't
what was the
ask, they're
last
not
thing
going to.
you said? Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, if you don't ask the lawyer if there's any recourse, you may not know that there is, right? My lawyer might tell you, well, no, there's nothing we can do about it. But you're never going to know that answer if you don't ask the question.
100%. Yeah, it's always definitely, and especially it's to your lawyer. So I feel like you should feel that you should have the confidence to just ask them the question, be like, hey, just wondering if I can do anything about this issue, some guidance would be nice. Because like that, they'll let you know if what you're saying doesn't make sense or if there is something to it and you can actually fight for it or who to talk to about it.
Yeah.
So
It
it's
may not
great that
come,
you did that.
yeah, I was going to say, it may not come free. If you have a really good relationship with your lawyer and you've been working with your lawyer for years, they might offer that advice at no charge. But if they're more often than not, it's going to be a billable event, but it's still worth it in the long run to, offset the cost paying a lawyer versus getting all the money back, or the money and compensation is worth the time. A few phone calls, a few emails.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And so, yeah, going forward then, because I was like, I wanted to make sure we talked about that too. We touched on that because that was, it's also interesting, good to know that, you can do something about if there is a pest issue. Is it for, like, can it be for pests or it was specifically like for that, like, because it's bed bugs? Or would that kind of go for, I think it'd probably go for anything, right? Any kind of pest. If there's like invasion of like something there, you can probably, have like have that taken care of through the lawyers.
Yeah, in this instance, because it wasn't disclosed to us. It wasn't known. That's why the lawyer referred to it as a latent defect. That it was just basically was unaware of. We were unaware of it when we were going through the process, and so whether it's bugs or rats or mice or cockroaches, I don't think it's so much relevant as the fact that it wasn't disclosed. But I mean, that's beside the point. We got that taken care of, and after all is said and done, it was a great learning opportunity, and
100%.
for me personally to understand some of this stuff. But we were winning the war, and that's the big thing so far.
100%. And you guys better remember that term. Was it latent defect? Remember it just in case it happens to you.
Yeah.
Good to know because I didn't actually know that one. So that's a great tip for people to know because like that you just never know when that can happen or even realize that that's something that is happening. Sometimes we may think like that. It's just something that happened and not much I can do about it, but you can. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
Any
here's
other
I
pardon?
was going to show you my latest discovery when you're talking about some challenges. So here's my latest discovery: is this suite,
Awesome.
which has this new flooring, so you can see there, and this new lighting that we put up, these new lights. So I actually had this suite ready for tenants to move in beginning of this month. I came in to do my last minute walkthrough prior to them coming in, and I walked into this bedroom and I discovered on this wall a bunch of these bubbles. I don't know if you can see them here, but these bubbles.
Yeah.
And this suite had just been thermal treated about 2 weeks prior. And so I had some conversations with a few people and we came to the conclusion that the walls probably weren't painted correctly by the previous whoever painted this, and who knows how many years ago. Probably didn't paint it correctly, and when that thermal treatment heated the walls, it created there might have been some moisture back there that then, whether it was in there for who knows how long, and it basically cooked everything, and it basically created these bubbles, and it was probably because there wasn't any, it had to be oil-based primer, and it may not have been oil-based primer. So it's a new discovery. It's not a problem, but fortunately I had a vacant, so I just moved somebody up I just moved them up to another suite, and they're probably going to stay there now once they get settled. And they're paying the same either way. But that's the latest one now, is to get that tackled real quick, get some good quotes to get it tackled real quick so that we can get somebody in here for next month. But a new discovery, new problem, new solution.
Yeah, interesting. So, because then it makes you wonder, for example, if that would because that's specifically on the drywall. That's the issue, right? Is that drywall?
You know what? It's actually concrete wall.
Oh,
It's
it's
a
concrete
concrete
one.
wall. Yeah, it's concrete block separating two walls. So there's two suites with this
Yeah.
concrete block wall between the two. And it's just paint on there. It's probably, who knows how many layers of paint over the years that's on there.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
You don't know what
interesting.
you don't know till you know it.
Yeah, 100%. Or even because, yeah, you're right. Maybe there probably is a certain type of paint that you have to use for concrete because concrete is known to be like absorb moisture very easily, isn't it? I'm pretty sure like concrete absorbs moisture. So you probably that first coat probably has to be like the right coat to make sure that it's not grabbing from other like moisture from the walls or anything
Yeah,
inside. It's very interesting.
yeah, yeah.
So there's always, and I feel like that's something that us as real estate investors have to get used to is that I feel like you'll never know everything. There's always going to be something new. There's always going to be something that you won't know, won't be able to pick up. Um, and that you're just going to have to let it happen, learn from it, and accept it and not get put off by it. That, no, I'm not going to do real estate because there's too many problems and just have more of that, like you have, that resolution. Like, okay, let's fix this, learn from it, and then, we'll just make sure that next time it won't happen again.
Yeah, well, something else I also learned too when it comes to this pest control, as I become more knowledgeable in the area of pest control, is I now produce a pest control agreement with every one of my tenants. So before my tenant can get keys, I give them this pest control agreement, which they're required to read, and they're required to sign off acknowledging that if there is any pests in the building at any point in time, that we are now responsible for their personal possessions. So I'll give you an example. When we first started with these bed bugs, I had tenants coming to me saying, well, you got to replace my bed. I just bought a new mattress. Now I got bed bugs in here and blah, blah, blah. Well, now with this pest control agreement, it's no, you signed this agreement stating that we would not need to replace your bedding or your clothes or whatever it is because of pests, because they can come in on your shoe, they can come in on your clothes, they can come in on used furniture. You leave a door open in the cool and a mouse could come running in the door. That's not my problem. That's because you didn't close the door properly. So this pest control agreement wasn't on my radar as even something to consider. But I did a little bit of research. I found another property manager that uses the pest control agreements. So I just said, hey, can I basically have that template and adapt it? They said, yep, go for it. So now I include that in every leasing.
That's awesome. That's also a great tip because you're right, like that, like, and even that in itself can get very expensive depending what it is that needs to be replaced. And exactly you said, right? It's you never know who's bringing it in, especially once you've done the treatments. And if someone is still bringing it in, it's not really our fault as real estate investors, as the owners of the properties. It's like making sure that the tenants take care of their things and make sure that they're not allowing that to come in. Because I feel like if the responsibility is on the landlord, they'll be always not caring. It's like, oh, they'll replace it for me, and it's just kind of like you got to have the tenants be responsible of their things and the place they live in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then definitely that pest control agreement is one way of encouraging that if they do end up with an infestation in their beds, and we've done all this stuff, well, I'm not taking responsibility for it because you signed this agreement. I'm not saying you brought it in, but I'm not saying that we brought it responsible either, but we're not responsible for replacing your bed.
100%. Yeah, that's a lot of great tips for for this like one show. I feel like we're getting lots of awesome, really good tips, and especially like that. Like I really enjoyed that we could talk about this because, at least I've never had anyone on the show talk about a pest issue, and I think it's very important because I'm sure it happens a lot, and it's good for us to be aware of the different kind of problems that can happen when it's related to some type of pest issue.
Yeah. No, I'm glad.
And like that,
that
even
this
like
is the
the
first thing.
after effects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I'm saying I heard you say that this is the first time that you've had a conversation about the pests. So it's a great opportunity then for people that haven't experienced it to, pay attention to some of the stuff so they can be prepared in the future, whether it's what to look for, what to ask when doing a walkthrough, to a pest control agreement, to not being afraid to spend the money for, for some of the higher quality pest control strategies, so you can get in front of it rather than be constantly falling behind and chasing after it.
100%. And I just think like that, because you're dealing with bigger buildings, like multi-family units, buildings, it's a very different environment to, like, let's say houses where it may have 1, 2, max, maybe 3 units. So you may not have, those problems may not be as common as when you're dealing with a building that has, like yours is like 10, 20, once you start getting into bigger buildings, the more people that are on it, I feel like the more problems that can come up. And so I feel like in a building, for sure, like that, dealing with these kind of issues is probably more, I'm sure it's not very common, but it's more common in the multi-unit sector, because in the bigger multi-unit sector, because like that it's more, or even in the different areas, if you're, depending on which areas you're in, maybe just it happens more than in other areas.
Yeah. Well, I was going to comment on that, Diana, is that you're absolutely right. When you are in buildings with these common areas, common hallways, common laundry rooms, exercise facilities, you've got more people that are flowing through those areas. You have one person who's walking through with bed bugs on their pants, on their shoes. Well, that could end up in the carpet. It could end up in someone else's shoe, and now it's in another suite. This building is like garden style, so there's just like single entry. There's no common entry. There's only common space is the laundry. So the only time that tenants are going to come into contact with other tenants or whatever they're bringing, the shoes, etc., whether even it's a cold, COVID, whatever, is going to be in a common area. It's not going to be when they're walking up to their door, because they're the only one who use that door. So that's really an important thing for the viewers to understand too, is when you're looking at different properties. If you see a garden style property with a single point of entry for the suite, or you see a common area where everybody's going to go through that door, well, then the chances of an infestation may increase because of the more common areas that exist in that building.
100%. Yeah, great points. That's it. And actually, now that you talk about, curious on, like that, like dealing, like how is, when it comes to the building, how either with maintenance and utilities, how are, for example, as like landlords and tenants, like, because landlords take care of common areas, what kind of things should people expect, like landlords, building owners expect to have to maintain, let's say when it comes to a building?
Well, part of it's going to be
not specifically with yours, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like, you could have, like, this building specifically, the power is individually separate metered. So the tenants are paying for their own power, but the water and the heat is not separate. So that's being paid for as an ongoing expense by the landlord. Whether there's a tenant in there or not, you're still paying for the heat and still paying for the water. And paying for the power when it's vacant, but then it can be transferred to the new tenant. So, some other buildings might be individually metered across all three, the power, the heat, and the water. So then the landlord is only paying those expenses when it's vacant. But then the other ongoing expenses, of course, property taxes, which goes up. What's the other one that's common thing? Insurance goes up. You're always going to be paying those regardless, right? And I had, when I first gave the notice of rent increase to one of the tenants, he was, became a little bit combative with me and challenging. I said, look, man, so you haven't had a rent increase in who knows how long, but I can tell you what has increased: the cost of power, the cost of water, the cost of heat, the cost of taxes, and the cost of insurance. These have all gone up. Your rent has not. So your rent is going to go up to offset some of those costs. Well, he didn't know what to say. And I thought maybe he was going to give me a notice that he's vacating, but no, he's staying. He's got no place else to go. I'm not taking advantage of him because it's fair. It's a fair market value, but he is paying the rent. So I think part of it was educating him on, we're not just like cutthroat landlords who are trying to gouge you. All these expenses sometimes have to be offset by the tenants.
And even things like, just even thinking of inflation, just like inflation has made things go up like crazy. And like you said, it just impacts all the expenses that are having to be dealt with the building itself.
Yeah, yeah.
100%. And so, like that with maintenance, what is like for your building, what is that regular monthly or maybe quarterly? I don't know how, but what are your like, what kind of things do you have to regularly maintain?
Well, right now the lawn is probably one of the biggest things. So I probably pay about $100 a month for lawn care maintenance. And I'm fortunate that I've gotten some people that will do it for a really, really good, reasonable price. And we acquired this building in January, so half the winter was over. Didn't go, I think I only had to remove snow once in the back park lane. So we'll see what those expenses can look like this winter, whether it's going to be similar to last year where we had so much snow that, I mean, they hadn't had that much snow in 15, 20 years in New York, maybe longer. So whether will it be a similar summer, which is going to require, or a similar winter, which is going to require, higher than normal expenses for snow removal, or maybe it'll be normal and won't only remove snow maybe half the time. But I was fortunate to get really good pricing on the lawn care, which is an ongoing expense.
And what about for the common areas? You probably have to have some regular cleaning in there?
I go in there and I give it, it's a small area, so it's not huge. The square footage isn't that great. It's like one washer, one dryer, some lockers. Whenever I'm there, if it needs a sweep, I grab a broom, I sweep it up. I got a tenant who cleans it when he's there, when he's doing his laundry. I make sure that there's an actual garbage bag inside the garbage can so that the bag can just be pulled and tied, and not having to have dump that stuff and make a bigger mess or stir things up. So it's these small little things, recycling bags for the newspapers and garbage bag for the garbage, and then just making sure that it's removed on a regular basis. And but again, like some of these tenants, they're more than happy to do some of this stuff, just to keep
Yeah,
busy.
that's great. And there probably are also like the common or like for the outside, are there any like utilities that you have to take care of for common area expenses?
Well, there's exterior lights, above all the doors, like all the entrances face the same direction, so they face the street. So when you're driving by the street, one thing I made sure of in the wintertime, once we took is I drove by at night to make sure that all the lights were working. So there would be 8 exterior lights. So that's going to be covered, as a general kind of a main power for the building. But so that's probably the only one. The water and the heat, I mean, that's just going to be an ongoing thing because it's all 1 meter. The main power, and then whatever power is required when there's a vacancy.
Interesting. Any other problems that came up or that you wanted to discuss in this building?
Well, there's always tenant issues. There's midnight moves. There's tenants that you screen that you think are good tenants, and then find out that they're not above board, and maybe there's some late rents, some late payments, and stuff like that. So those are the things I'm always aware of, and I make sure that I give those notices. I give verbals, I give emails, I give texts, I give messages through Facebook, whatever means of communication I can have to kind of remind people that hey, rent might be due here, or hey, you're not authorized for that, or so those are things all landlords are going to deal with. Unauthorized pets, too many occupants, people not paying rent on time, midnight moves. It's just a matter of keeping up my funnel full of leads so that when I got a vacancy, I can start screening people and get them in. And the biggest, interestingly enough, probably the biggest one that I've had, the biggest challenge has been a bachelor suite. And a bachelor suite, the studio suite for one person, one occupant. That's probably been the biggest challenge, is getting a good qualified tenant. And I say good qualified because if I just wanted to fill with anybody, I could fill it with.
Yeah, I'm going to get tons of applications, and it's just but finding the right one is the issue.
That's right, because I might have a bigger problem on my hands if I just take every single person who applies. Find out that not only can they not afford income, but they lied on their application and even evicted 3 times. Now what I do, right? So I have a very strict screening criteria that I follow. And I try to make sure that first leads to second, second leads to third, third leads to the final leads ends up in a leasing document.
100%. And actually, you know what's an interesting stat? I mean, it sounds like it may be similar actually in Saskatchewan, but we were doing some stats in like close to Toronto, around Hamilton, and or no, sorry, we're doing stats for Ontario, and actually, bachelors have the highest vacancy rates. And which it would probably make sense, right? Because I feel like usually it's young people, singles that are probably wanting to live there. Because I feel like usually, let's say couples probably still want to have their own room separate to the rest of the house and things like that. Whereas like if you have someone who's young, you know, if for example a recession comes, they're like, oh, I can go back to my parents' place, you know, so or I can go, you know, or it's like so it seems like, or I mean, these are my guesses to the stats that we're looking at because we were doing stats in Ontario and just trying to get an idea of what's coming next. And that was something that we found interesting was that bachelors in Ontario have a high vacancy rate. And we noticed it increased when, you know, the recessionary periods happened.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's probably very similar here. I saw some CMHC data about that here a couple of years ago. Studio suites had the highest vacancy rate than the ones, twos, threes, and that's part of the problem, right? Is they're sometimes it's transient people, so they're moving around lots, so they might only want someplace for 3 months, and most landlords don't want people 3 months; they want them for 3 years. So, you know, do I want to take something for 3 months or wait 1 month vacancy and then maybe get a longer term? So these people are in and out; they're moving around lots, right? Or it's a student that's there for 9 months and then they're gone for 3, and then they're back another 9 and they're gone for 3. Or it's people downsizing at the end of their career and they no longer want to be living in bigger properties, or maybe there's a separation and now they just need something temporarily. But it's always it's probably the least stable out of all your bed counts is a studio suite. But needless to say, I think I've got somebody that I'm doing a viewing in this studio suite in about 10 minutes actually. So this might, you know, be a good, you know, might end up being a good conversation with her.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks for, yeah, I feel like tenants is always learn. Actually, let's end off with, do you have any tips for, within your experience of like what you've dealt with tenants, any tips for the viewers on things to watch out for, or any tips for improving their process, for their own process? Anything you'd like to share? A couple of tips?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I've kind of been going back and forth on this. You know, what would be the best system, and most efficient system for screening tenants? I've done things where I've had people contact me and say, hey, can I go look at a property? And so I drive over. Yorkton's small, 20,000 people. So I can make it from where I live to the other end of the city in 15 minutes. And then another 15 minutes back. So no big deal, except when I get there, they don't show up. So now I've wasted 15 minutes of my time. Then I wait around 5, 10, 15 minutes, they don't show up. Now another 15 minutes home. Well, now there's almost an hour of my day gone because someone didn't have the courtesy to tell me they weren't going to show up for the viewing. So I decided at that point in time, I was never going to just voluntarily show a place again without doing some kind of qualification process beforehand. Either we're going to have a conversation on the phone, they're going to give me an application, or we're going to have some Facebook chat prior to understand, is this person really serious about going to this viewing, or are they just kicking tires? Then, of course, I'm sure every landlord has discovered this, property manager. People don't always tell the truth on their applications. So if we take those applications as truth, we're going to be in for real surprise when we find out that they pull the wool over our eyes because they weren't honest. So now I'm using a screening tool called Single Key. And so I will pay for the application, for basically a background check. I'll pay for the background check, and I'll send them an invitation. They fill out the documentation, and I get a report generated in less than an hour. Credit score, criminal history, social media profile checks, and probably the last 3 or 4 known addresses. And I'll cross-reference that address with the address they put on the application. There's no match, we're having a conversation. If they tell me they don't have a criminal record and it shows up there, we're having a conversation. If they tell me they got an A1 credit score and they got a B- credit score, we're having another conversation. And it's all about screening them for credibility and integrity. Because if they're going to be dishonest there, are they going to pay the rent on time? Or what kind of story are they going to give me when they don't pay their rent on time? So I've
Mm-hmm.
been very, very particular, and I've been fine tuning it each and every time and making it more stringent and tight. And I've had people say, this is too much information. And I've had somebody tell me, I don't want to give you a credit check. That's personal information. Okay, those are red flags for me. Bye-bye, find someplace else to rent. I know it might
I
sound heartless, but
completely
at the end, there's a bottom line that we got to protect. And there's a property that we got to protect, right?
I completely agree with you. It's very true. I've had people tell me, for example, oh my God, your application form, in the application form, it said something along the lines like, they answered everything, but so it's very, very interesting because this specific person actually answered everything, but in the end felt like I was uncomfortable, and it just like let me know I was uncomfortable answering all these questions. Whereas like in general, the way I see it is like, they will only answer like not even half. And like you said, if someone doesn't answer the like majority of the questions, I don't even call them back. I'm like, it's like I feel like you're hiding something. Might as well move on to the next one. But I did find it interesting. This person actually did fill out the whole form, but kind of just left me a little note. Like I felt really uncomfortable with these questions, and I was like. And like, yes, it may be uncomfortable in my head, I didn't say it to them, but yes, it may be uncomfortable. At the same time, you're living in my place.
That's right. That's right. And the other thing too that goes with that is I know for me, I get a lot of my leads through Facebook Messenger. So my Facebook ads, right? And people will message me, and then we'll go offline. We'll go off onto like a direct message chat. I learn a lot about these people just through chatting back and forth. So if somebody's inquiring about a studio, so I'll say, well, how many occupants? And they'll say, well, 4. I'll say, okay, well, you're asking for 4 people in a bachelor suite. That's not suitable for me. That's not a fit. Find yourself a 2-bedroom. Oh, by the way, I have a 2-bedroom that we can talk about. And so I steer them towards better options just by having a conversation. And I didn't waste my time driving to the property to discover 4 people climbing out of a vehicle and all wanted to stay in a bachelor suite.
Yeah.
So it's good to have those conversations, anytime you can. Just,
100%. And like you said, in advance to it so that you don't feel like you're wasting your time like that. Imagine coming up to people coming up to the property for a bachelor and 4 people coming out and you're like, are all of you guys staying here or just coming for the ride,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Any other last minute things that you'd like to share before we end the call?
No, I think we've touched on some pretty deep topics already, Diana. So I appreciate the questions and the
Yeah,
directions
thank
we're
you so
taking.
much for sharing. Yeah, it was so informative. Lots of great information you provided for us. And so if you guys love what you hear and you love what Randall has shared, definitely give him a follow. If you're looking to invest in Saskatchewan, you guys know where to go now. You have someone there that can help you out, partner with whatever you like. And if you guys love the show and you guys love what you hear on my shows, definitely follow me and so you can keep up with what's going on. So thank you, Randall. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity, and it was a great topic.
Awesome. Thank you, Randall. See everyone in the next episode. Bye, everyone. Bye, Randall.